Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever you happenstance into this incredible dialogue with the new Untouchables. This is our 61st edition, and we are recording this on Friday, March 7th, 2026, at approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And my friends, it has been an enormous week of information to respond to. But I think what we should start off with, obviously, is what happened the night after our last recording, where at 2 o'clock in the morning, President Trump had announced war on Iran and everything that's come since. So, as always, I'm going to start off just to set the table by sharing my screen and providing some headlines as well as for us all to comment on and to respond to. So, a week after incredible military incursion into Iran and all things around the world, quite frankly, including a bunch of different theaters and surprisingly places like UAE and Qatar, and a torpedo with obviously a sinking from the U.S. submarine and everything that goes along with it. We look at Trump shifts goals now, demanding Iran's unconditional surrender within a week. That's pretty amazing. Simultaneously, oil and gas prices climb and the economic cost of the war climbs. Trump is the first modern president in the United States to wage war without obviously making the case for it, even though that's not exactly right. But I understand what they're doing. And then, a couple of other things that I thought we needed to just comment. Obviously, there was a lot of reaction to Jesse Jackson's funeral today. And I know, of course, Lewis Clark was very involved with the civil rights movement. So hopefully we can comment as that as well. But markets are in turmoil, and more to the point, things that I wanted to break into and just really set up for the group here is I was really fascinated with this speech by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse on the floor yesterday, and just to set the table, he's talking about Epstein, but he's talking about Epstein's links to Russia. And I'm just going to give you like a minute of this, but he provides information that I was kind of shocked that it was coming from Senator Whitehouse after all of the information over the years that we haven't heard from other administrations, particularly their AGs. But I'll
And
just
as a footnote, Pat, you should also know that he's a former United States attorney from Rhode Island.
right, right. Well, and boy, is he distinguished and just incredibly um, impressive when he delivers his case. But just kind of want to set the table. But I thank you for that, Paul. One moment.
And he's a blue blood.
Oh, I bet. Okay, here we go.
So, what is it about Trump and Russia? And could it have any connection with Trump's close friendship with the deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein? Much about Epstein remains unknown. But the survivors who have come forward and the millions of emails released through the bipartisan Epstein Files Transparency Act have shed some light on the operation of the late financier's global pedophile ring.
I'll just set the stage. You can see here that he went on for 48 minutes. He details unbelievable specificity about information that seems to me that should have been front page news 2 decades ago in the New York Times, let alone what we're finding out about now. But as it has this convergence with the war, I thought I'd also just point out just a couple of things from this jaw-dropping testimony from Hillary Clinton as she was answering questions to the congressional committee regarding Epstein as well. And I'll just say my reaction to watching both Mr. and Mrs. Clinton, or former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, they seemed to run circles around the silly questions that they were being asked. But here's kind of an example.
Showing me an email from someone who I don't recall knowing about a fundraiser that wasn't for me, but was for Congresswoman Lowy. I have no information. Okay. I went to the fundraiser to support my friend Nia Lowy.
All right. Excuse me, can I interrupt?
I have
There are
another.
photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying from inside this room. Can you please advise me as to whether or not that's permissible and consistent with the rules, particularly given that we have asked for a public hearing? If there are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying, can you please explain how
I'm done with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for
So
heaven's
I'd like
sake.
to understand how that's permissible.
For the hearing, like,
Ms. Clinton's and her attorneys just basically ran circles around the folks that were asking the questions, but there was definitely a lot of important points. But here I wanted to also show President Clinton responding to a pretty interesting question.
there has been new information that has come out regarding the autopsy of Mr. Epstein. I would just like to ask you personally and directly, do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
Are you asking him to speculate on how Mr. Epstein died?
I'm asking what the president thinks of.
So you're asking his opinion?
Mr. President, was your friend Jeffrey Epstein
Are you
suicidal?
classifying him as a friend who he has testified that he was
has called him a
friendly?
friend in a letter.
He said he was friendly, but not, you've asked for his
Mr.
testimony.
President, do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein was suicidal?
You know.
Was he ever
She's asking
suicidal?
the rest of your
I
understanding.
don't know. I only know what the medical finding was. I think maybe
That's
he
it.
finally got caught. I don't know.
Whatever that means. And lastly, to tee up everybody's favorite, I don't know what we want to call it, but the theatrics that took place between Kristi Noem and Torn Lewandowski on, obviously the taxpayer's dime, in addition to all things ICE, was just really a particularly gross reflection of all things this administration. But then, of course, Trump fired her, and whatever that means. So I'm going to stop share, and I'm going to ask June Carbone, the Rabina Chair of Law, Science, and Technology, kind of to respond really to the goings on of what's transpired since we last met.
Sure. And I'm going to take a slightly different take on these events from the way I usually do and say that I feel a vibe shift that gives me some ground for optimism. Let's start with the Iran war. So we have a local listserv, it used to be just local listserv, selling things, events, comments. And the people who run it tried very hard to keep it non-political. With the ICE invasion of Minneapolis, that became impossible. And there was lots of information. Where is ICE operating? And then, how can you contribute? Food, help, and lots of snark and lots of trolls. And that intensified after Renee Good and Alex Preddy died. When the first casualties from the Iran war were announced, there's a woman from White Bear Lake, suburb of Minneapolis, 2 days away from returning home to her 9-year-old daughter and the rest of her family. And there were posts about her. And the thing that was different is, there were many posts, and some of them had a little bit of a MAGA vibe or a little bit of a resistance vibe, but I couldn't be sure. There was no snark, and there were no trolls. And Governor Walz has announced that flags in Minnesota shall fly at half-mast in honor of the soldier. And this is something a little bit new. This sense of community that arose with the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy was very powerful, but it didn't include MAGA supporters. This is a continuation of the same very strong sense of a community coming together, and it does include both sides of the political aisle. And that's different. And I find that encouraging. The second thing I want to note is the Texas primary. So you can say all kinds of things. We could talk the entire hour about the Texas primary. But I was heartened, given what took place. that you have the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, who intervenes. The Republicans refused to agree with Democrats, contrary to what had been the practice on voting procedures. The result was that enormous confusion about where to go to vote, and a local judge keeping the polls open an extra couple of hours so people who went to the wrong place could be directed to the right place and have the right to vote preserved. Ken Paxton, a candidate in the Republican primary, immediately went to the state Supreme Court, one of the most corrupt and partisan state Supreme Courts in the country, in part because they're elected. And it's Texas, very few rules on who can contribute. Law firms that appear before the court are major contributors. And the Supreme Court promptly shut down the keeping the voter polls open and required segregation of the ballots cast after the time when they were normally amended. Well, the single biggest group of votes affected are Dallas County, and this is Jasmine Crockett's stronghold. The next day, she conceded graciously and endorsing James Tellerico, who won, and no mention of what took place, which is Republican vote rigging. There's no indication it affected the outcome, but that she was gracious and promptly joined in the support of Tellerico after what had been a quite nasty primary, I think is a good sign going forward. Tellerico was also gracious, but one would expect the winner to be. I thought they presented a united front in the face of what was pretty outrageous behavior. I also want to note the pushback that we see occurring. So with Kristi Noem, the hearings the day before almost certainly provoked Trump to fire. And it's really interesting. So you had Tom Tillis, who is not running for re-election, but is a Republican from South Carolina, directly challenging her. I'm sorry, from North Carolina?
North.
And directly challenging her because 30 days ago, he had asked for information about what Homeland Security was doing with respect to North Carolina and with respect to federal funds, and she hadn't responded. And he's threatening to hold her in contempt. You had Senator Kennedy, a Republican from Louisiana, asking her questions about the $200 million she spent in contracts to, by the way, favored contractors, to run all these ads profiling her. And she insisted that Donald Trump had authorized the spending. And the rumors are that's what got her fired, throwing him under the bus. But the Republican willingness to confront her almost certainly provoked Trump's action and is striking. And finally, I want to note that what we also see happening is Donald Trump ran against forever wars. When AOC, the very progressive congresswoman from Staten Island, described why her supporters supported Trump, believing he would not send the military and get the military bogged down in foreign wars, was right up there with inflation, a major factor for her supporters. And what we're seeing is all kinds of questioning about what is Trump doing, and especially, does he know what he's doing? Most of us think there's a lot of evidence at how surprised he has been that Iran could hit American targets elsewhere in the Persian Gulf. How surprising that even if the military is willing to escort ships through the Straits of Hormuz, that insurers aren't going to insure the ships, which will shut them down just as effectively as ballistic missiles or drones, that he seems to know almost nothing about the Middle East and going to war. And the announcement from the Washington Post this afternoon was, guess what Vladimir Putin is doing? He's helping Iran with targeting of American installations in the Middle East. I think the question ought to be, whose president is smarter than whose? And all these things are accumulating in ways that are almost guaranteed to weaken Trump's authority in a way that may not damage him with the absolute base, but is going to rile up everybody else,
Well,
including the MAGA adjacent voters who were the ones who made the difference, putting him over the top.
Well, Paul Pelletier, the veteran of the Department of Justice, and of course, in private practice, an adjunct professor at George Washington University. I've been looking forward all week to set this question up for you, but then I got thrown a curveball when the satire of Kristi Noem came to light, and I was looking forward to your comments. But the DOJ has been in the spotlight in a way that I've never seen the DOJ in a spotlight. And I do have to ask, considering all of these, depositions that we've seen, and the questioning that I saw, particularly as it relates to all things Les Wexner, which is a giant question mark, because his wife worked for Davis Polk in mergers and acquisitions, and I have a hard time believing that they would not know where the money was going, which was his testimony with regards to to Epstein. So we have Mr. Blue Blood Sheldon Whitehouse on the floor, giving us a chronology of all things Epstein in a way that nobody's brought to us publicly before in one continuum, at least in government, that I've observed myself. What are your thoughts? Because it just seems like the information was there the whole time. We know the FBI sat on certain information. Don't know which direction you want to go. Maybe it's Kristi Noem, but I look forward to it.
No, so to fill out June's point, June said the MAGA adjacent people are riled up a little bit too, but there's nothing that riles up MAGA adjacent or MAGA people more than Epstein and the Epstein files. And this drip of, now we saw yesterday, the three FBI interviews of the woman who accused Trump directly of sexually assaulting her. This drip is going to continue to haunt Trump, I believe. And anytime that there's bad news, you always want just one day of bad news. But because the DOJ has effed this up 9 ways to Sunday, this is really, I think, a bonus to the Democratic Party, because it is constant drip of information that haunts Trump. And these are people who are directly accusing Trump of sexually assaulting them. And if you read those 302s, they have really detailed information of what was going on. And at the end of the day, the woman who says she was raped, and I believe her testimony, by Trump at 13, she says pretty much in the end of one of these 302s, to what end am I doing this effectively? Like, there's no good that can come out of this for me. And so, and I think that that's the story, right? All these victims have still been victimized. They're survivors, but they're continuously being victimized. And I think what's exposed by Sheldon Whitehouse and his methodology, what's exposed by Les Wexner, is nobody has followed the money so far. And that's what has been shocking to me throughout this whole thing, because the FBI, that's what they're supposed to do. And even if the Miami case was screwed up because of all the things we know, particularly the fact that the state authorities threw it at the federal government because they were getting pushback, and the federal government seems to have taken what they gave him, and they were just running with taking what the state gave them. And it looks like they put together a case based upon that information. It doesn't look like there was a real earnest, deep investigation. So I think that's what happened there. But what I failed to see is how, when the case went to New York ultimately in 2019, when they were actually investigating the trafficking and they were seeing this evidence of Les Wexner, and when they were listing co-conspirators and victims, why did that end? And quite frankly, it was 2019. Maybe someone put the kibosh on it, but we've seen no evidence now that in post 2020, after Biden got elected, why the investigation went no further. I'm still dumbfounded by that. I haven't seen any good documents which show why they shut down that investigation or failed to proceed further. And we've not gotten an answer for that from that yet. And I'm really dumbfounded by that. And the only explanation I have at this stage is what we've been talking about on this on for the past 61 episodes, and that is the failure of the United States government to go after elites, right? And that to me might be the answer. I don't know because we haven't seen it, but it is doggone stupefying that we don't have that. Now on the good news front that June started, I think that what we saw last week was two very important things. And one was the fact that the DOJ relinquished and gave up in their lawsuit against in their fight against the big law firms from capitulating to Trump's extortion play. And God bless all of them for doing that. And I think it makes the law firms who capitulated look really bad. But the second thing that happened in the past couple of days is we learned that the Florida bar is going after Lindsay Halligan for they're investigating her for potential ethics violations, which I think is great. But what it also spurned is the DOJ now is trying, and I don't know how far they're going with this, is trying to get a rule enacted where federal prosecutors are not bound by state ethic laws. And back in 1995, when in Miami, we were going after a bunch of attorneys, we were being attacked by people who filing bar complaints against us like crazy. And there was talk back then of putting bar rules in that protected this through the supremacy clause, federal prosecutors' actions. Back then, each state had the ABA has model rules which talk about prosecutors' role in ethical obligations, but for the most part, there's no federal rules that bind federal prosecutors in the way state ethics rules do, or in the way model ABA rules do. So there's been talk of that for a long time, but now that I hear this, I learned today that there's talk of that again to exempt federal prosecutors from ethics rules. While I was a prosecutor, I thought that was a good idea. Because I had been attacked so much by people filing complaints against me with the bar. But now I'm thinking that's a really bad idea. But the good news is the states look like they're challenging. People are filing complaints against some of these people, and the states are taking it seriously.
Can I just note on that there is notice and comment rulemaking on these proposals by DOJ, and individuals are welcome to submit comments. I don't have at my fingertips the Federal Register notice about it, but there is a process, and if you want to object, you can do so.
Well, Bill, Paul's characterization of the DOJ being stupefying, and it's I don't know, not being able to bring the stuff forward, especially following the money, is definitely in your bailiwick. And again, because I didn't do the introductions at the beginning, William K. Black is a professor, an expert in criminology at the University of Minnesota. He's decades-long regulator, expert in all things economics and the law, and our guiding light in the corruption discussion. And I wonder, Bill, where you want to start with this, but it just seems absurd to me that we literally wouldn't have subpoenaed, for example, Les Wexner's wife. She knows where the money went. She had to.
Yeah, so everybody on this panel has done investigations, and these are not matters of judgment, right? There's just a catastrophic failure to do real investigations when they were obviously compelled. And to pick up on Paul's point, we make jokes about the sovereign district of New York and its immense power, but in fact, the Southern District of New York has, for 80 plus years, had a stellar reputation on ability. So it's particularly frightening that they did not do some of the most obvious investigative things in existence. And to build on Paul's point, the witness, the victim, we have failed them at a time when they just absolutely needed it. Children cannot fight back against these things. The fact that the bravery comes from children who knew that they would be exposing themselves to vicious attacks by coming forward, and that their integrity and willingness to take on folks so exceeds our most elite prosecutors in one of our top offices, in the top office in the world for those kind of field abilities, is not just shocking, it's disgraceful. And there's a story, probably many stories there, which is, I think, Paul's point in part. Because we also haven't investigated why they didn't investigate.
Yeah, and Bill, one of the reasons why we all took these public service jobs, or at least the biggest reason, is to either protect potential victims or actual victims. I mean, that's why we're in those jobs, which is frightening to me what you're saying about how did that just go off the radar, you know?
Yeah. By the way, it's a proof of nonpartisanship, but nonpartisanship at its worst, as opposed to at its best. Now, what I've heard, Paul, is that as soon as they announced that they were dropping the suits against the law firms, they, came back 20 minutes later and said, oops, no, we're not. We fired the guy that made the decision.
Yeah, I heard that too. Yep.
So it's even worse. I mean, can you imagine going into court after that in front of the judges who already believe these actions are the opposite of righteous and such? This is a terrible move. I understand it well. I was sued for $400 million in a Bivens action by Charles Keating. Makes it hard to, buy a home. Contingent liabilities. I need a sheet with more room. There's not enough room for all the zeros in my contingent liabilities. June can tell you about this phase as well of our married life. But you cannot carve out immunity, right? As much as we would like it individually, because it is abused, right? It is definitely abused. Indeed, in the Keating case, there's one of the top lawyers in America presenting to Keating a plan to use scores of Bivens actions to try to incapacitate the regulators, right? So, yeah, you need a proactive judiciary that's going to get rid of non-righteous cases very quickly and such, but you cannot give immunity to something like the Trump administration, or the results will be catastrophic in terms of the worst of the worst lawyers doing these things, okay? Now, let me just pick up very briefly on the Ukrainian point, right? So Ukraine has the greatest knowledge in the world, and it's nothing close, on how to protect sites from these kind of Iranian drones, which are precisely the ones being used. And even on equipment we provided them, Patriots, their crews actually have vastly more experience than any US Patriot crew, because they're on duty every night and you learn things, and they're very creative. And what do we have in these circumstances when any rational president of the United States learning that, and they would have learned long before the Washington Post, right, that Russia was helping Iran target our troops? What was Carolyn Leavitt's response? This vicious attack on the Ukrainians. at the when, which is A, completely unjustified, but B, it's insane when we absolutely need their help in dealing with these circumstances.
And they are helping. And they are
And
helping.
they are helping. It's just, this comes back to your question. If Trump isn't an agent, he is the best actor in the history of the world, because he sure as hell in all of his actions acts like he's compromised, that there is compromise, that the equivalent of it's called the FSB now, but it's KGB tactics to the nth. And contrary to what you may have been told by Republicans, it is not that the Justice Department found no efforts by the Russians to assist Trump. They just said there wasn't an actual conspiracy, that they had evidence of it. But we know that, in fact, that the Russians took many actions to benefit Trump and are continuing to do so.
Well, Mark,
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Let Mark go ahead. There are a couple of things Bill said I want to follow up on.
Well, go ahead, because I want to go a couple different directions. So, June, go.
Okay. So, what Bill is referring to is Pam Bondi lied to Congress, saying there is no evidence of Russian collusion. There is no evidence. There was insufficient evidence that Trump directed the Russian actions. There were many Russians indicted for interfering with the 2016 election. And that gets to two other points. One of the things not getting headline coverage are the deaths in Austin, which appeared to be the act of a terrorist. We don't know. But think about how, with no evidence, Republicans have been eager to scream terrorists. What we are not talking about is Kristi Noem took the people who are supposed to protect us from terrorism and either fired them because they had been involved in prior investigations of MAGA, or diverted them to work on immigrants. The Justice Department, even more so, has actively dismantled the people looking into foreign interference in everything. And Trump, in his recent press conferences, has basically said, are there going to be terrorist attacks on Americans? Well, that's a price I'm willing to pay. He didn't quite echo Shrek, but he came close. So where are we? Let's go back to Epstein. One of the big questions that runs through Epstein has been the suggestions that the information Acosta gave as to the reason for the sweetheart deal in 2008 was, foreign ties, intelligence issues. And we're beginning to get dribs and drabs, and we don't see people following up on the intelligence leads to the same degree they have followed up on some of the other Epstein tidbits. And I want to emphasize, too, it's clear Russians, and especially Russian money laundering, is all over both Trump deals and Epstein deals. David K. Johnston has been talking about the Trump deals for years. And we don't have a better picture of that. And the second thing are the Israeli ties. So what was on my newsfeed this morning is something about Israeli efforts to break into Clinton's inner circle when he was president, dealing with the Camp David efforts of getting a peace deal with the Palestinians, that Epstein was the vehicle for Mossad in those efforts. Now, again, do we know? I don't know how good that intelligence is. But there are all kinds of things about Epstein, including what happened the night before he died. He was allowed to make a phone call to his last girlfriend, who was abroad. That makes no sense. But there's been no, and that seems to have been confirmed by another number of sources. But I see no discussion, not just of why he was allowed to make the phone call, which is clearly not what Rikers Island typically does. But has anybody talked to her?
There's a crisis in terms of penetration and in a different way. And this is the prediction markets. We now know that the prediction markets had insiders that bet and made a fortune on exactly when the attack would begin on Iran, on exactly when the attack would occur in Venezuela, and when an Israeli attack was going to occur. The Israelis have arrested a reservist who had insider information. So we have now not only gotten rid of our protective devices, we've created this massive financial, or we've allowed the creation of this massive financial incentive to leak operational, vital operational security that can get many, many servicemen and women killed. And the administration is doing nothing. It won't even mention this.
One of my favorite lyrics, Marc Dann, the former state AG of Ohio and in current practice, private practice at Dan Law, as you can see behind. One of my favorite lyrics was from Bob Weir, the Grateful Dead, in a song called Throwing Stones, when he says, when his pants are down, his cover's blown. And he's talking about a rich man in his summer home. And it was just a fun sort of metaphor, or, just projection of what Bill just said. And I'm curious because you were such a, shall we say, in the context of how we found you on the con with the group that you put together to do the forensics and this deep dive analysis, it seems like you would have the capacity, to me, to have unbelievable questions as, let's say you were the director, let's just say you were the AG of the United States, okay? And you had 120,000 people. What would you prioritize? I don't want to take you away from the direction you're going, and this is a big question, but considering what everybody's talking about right now, how would you prioritize this incredible threat? We are collapsing right before our eyes because of the oligarchs. It's that simple.
Well, yeah, and I that's a question that would take about 9 1-hour podcasts to address. And let me give that some thought of what I would do in control of the Justice Department. I don't think I want that management job if I can avoid it. But I want to focus on something a little smaller and something that's right in front of us. And that is, I am so disappointed in congressional Democrats and how I know everybody's stunned and surprised that I am, but instead of focusing on this, and it's easy to get mired in the salacious details of these Epstein files and what went on. But what an incredible opportunity in front of Congress right now to expose this two-tiered system of justice that we've been talking about forever. And I feel like we've been talking about forever in a vacuum, unfortunately. Right. This is a kind of a almost exaggerated example of all the things that they didn't do. And let's start with with when the Epstein investigations happened the first time under multiple administrations, under multiple attorneys general, under multiple U.S. attorneys, that there was information that we now know was in the hands of Justice Department officials of crimes that were being committed that included espionage, that included pedophilia, human trafficking. Serious things, national security risks that were exposed, that they did absolutely nothing with at the time because of who it was, and the high cost of taking on the rich people. And elites in a criminal prosecution. We're watching this unfold in Ohio right now. The CEO and the chief lobbyist for First Energy are on trial finally to the credit of my successor, Dave Yost, who is, is not, I'm not always a fan of, but his office just persisted to make sure that the statute of limitations didn't get missed. They prosecuted all the politicians, the feds prosecuted all the politicians, but none of the people that paid the bribes. And Yost and his office and the Summit County prosecutor have gone after the CEO who benefited to the tune of about $30 million personally from the bribery scheme that First Energy engaged in with the Speaker of the House and the chair of the Ohio Public Utilities Commission. But they are represented by Jones Day, where I think Bill worked at one time.
No, Squire Sanders.
Oh, Squire Sanders. Okay, but a similar firm. I mean, Jones Day is at one time was the largest law firm in the country. It is a Cleveland institution. It has lawyers with we've learned recently have $3,000 an hour rates representing them. Both of these executives have indemnification agreements with First Energy. So First Energy is paying for their criminal defense in this case, and it is just they have worked. They're excruciatingly well defending these corporate executives. It's hard to win cases against rich guys. And I say guys because, it's mostly been guys over the years. And it is. And it's rare that anybody, succeeds in those, or it's not rare that you succeed, but it is a battle, and it is a resource suck on those departments. And to the credit of Dave Yost and to the credit of the Summit County prosecutor, they've devoted the resources. And by the way, it's the same Summit County where we ran the mortgage fraud investigation. So it's some of the same. They're getting old, but some of the same operatives have been involved in this investigation as well. But it is, and that's why they don't do it, because it's hard. But here the Democrats and the Republicans and the Patriots on the House Judiciary Committee, who are the House, what is it, the Oversight Committee, that are investigating the Epstein files, have just the opportunity of a lifetime to make the case to the American public about why there needs to be reform and why people of means need to be held to the same standards of people who don't have means, and to show just what horrible things can happen. Women raped, children raped, Russians provided with information. So the committee has failed the American people in a dramatic way, but so is the Justice Department, because look at what happened in Norway and in England with the two. There was one Norwegian, and there may have been more than one British subject, but there's certainly one, a high profile one, and immediately the prosecutors in those countries dropped everything they were doing, and I mean that metaphorically, and went to work and went after those bad actors. Well, there's two. There's actually two in Britain, and there may be more. But and where's the U.S. Justice Department? Because those files, and the whole point of Congress, I thought, of Congress ordering the Justice Department to release the files, was to cause them to expose the failure of the Justice Department to do their job, which is what congressional oversight should be about. But instead, this thing becomes like a comedy of partisanship, without any focus on what the job of the Oversight Committee is to do. What can we learn from what they didn't do with Epstein that will allow future attorneys general to do their job better? And we've learned nothing in this entire. we've blown this incredible opportunity because this is all stuff people understand. They may not understand, Bill, the intricacies of how a savings and loan operates, and how it can be used to enrich its principals. Okay, but they sure as hell understand raping a 14-year-old. Everybody understands what that is. And so, what an opportunity wasted to show that these rich men, mostly a few rich women, along the way, that 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 the Justice Department simply just never picked. Not only did they didn't drop the ball, they never picked it up. They never picked it up. There was a fumble on the field of all kinds of incredible information that we now know flowed into. And no, look, they can't investigate everything. There's a limit of resources that are available to prosecutors. It's a challenge every single day in a public prosecution office, to sort through the things that and certainly things are going to get missed. But this isn't by accident. This is the design of the U.S. Justice Department over the past, certainly my adult life. And so where is the oversight? And there's still opportunity. This hearing is ongoing. This committee investigation is ongoing. When are they going to start to talk about this? When are we going to see a report on why these folks were not investigated? Because you can't just say, I'm not going to investigate the people that can afford good lawyers that are going to make it hard to prosecute people. That's why you sign up for these jobs, because it's hard. And you're going to lose sometimes. But why over decades have Democratic and Republican attorneys general not run offices and created an environment and a reward system that held people of power and wealth accountable?
Amen. And, once again, to the audience, that's why this is the new Untouchables and why you have to like, subscribe, and share and get to everyone. And for those eyeballs out there that are watching this all the time, that are in a position to help shapeshift what needs to take steps next to amplify what I'm now going to introduce, Lewis Clark, the executive director of the Government Accountability Project, who works on the highest level whistleblower cases in the Beltway and for, really since 1976, and some of the greatest stories in the history of this country. But we're at a next level, and I was thinking of you, Lewis, on a couple of different levels. One, of course, is the passing of great civil rights activist and leader Jesse Jackson, and everything that took place today, because everybody's looking at President Obama, President Clinton, President Biden in attendance in the class in comparison. But they don't get away scot-free because their AGs were doing the same problems, of course. And when I watched that testimony between Mr. Clinton and President Clinton and Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, again, they were polished. Their attorneys ran circles around the questions, but then again, it was like, okay, but we know William Burns from worked in the State Department. He also was in the CIA, and then he ends up being tight knit with Jeffrey Epstein after the fact, with all of these other peoples, like we talked about Catherine Brummel, if I pronounce Brumler, pardon me. Brumler. High level, the highest level people, the richest people, the most connected people, they're all involved. And yet what we're all listening to, millions of people are just tapped into the victims of these crimes for the first time in decades. That's got to hit home for you because of the stories that you're sitting on.
Well, I think there are two major issues that we've been, that I'm hearing about the Justice Department in particular, but I think it's about going after the crimes of the rich. And that is that there is the omission, not bringing the case when there's evidence. But secondly, and I think that what we're seeing now is the cover up, is that, it's like, yeah, now we're, finally having some level of justice or at least transparency around what happened to those young girls, and now it's just full blown cover up, and which I think is a deeper sin, I guess, than omission. Is a cover up is part of the crime. It's part of the obstruction of justice, and that's what really the focus needs to be at this point in time, and that is, I think, what we're going to be hearing a lot about in maybe shadow hearings from here and until the end of the elections this year, but also next year, I think, in a great deal of detail. And I agree that it would be nice to have the Dems have a little bit more spine than we've seen. But I do think that that there is going to be a reckoning, and there's going to be a reckoning because these women are have really finally been listened to. They've stuck it out through a wilderness of silence and being ignored and cast aside. But I think that things are changing, and I think it's a very positive direction. And then sort of tying it a bit to today's celebration of Jesse Jackson's life. For one thing, is that listening to President Obama speak, it just was quite amazing, the soaring rhetoric and the soaring, actually, tribute that he provided. It just reminds me of the day that we used to have a president that could actually speak, to the heart of his audience, whatever it might be, whether it be that church itself or the greater nation. I guess it was a stadium, but at any rate, it really was a moving tribute, and one well deserved, obviously, by for Jesse's life and his family's sacrifice. But I think that what I was really moved by was Reverend Al Sharpton, because he really did. He did bring the house down, in my opinion, to say to everyone in the audience what we used to hear, I remember, of the 60s in the civil rights movement in that day, is that you didn't go to a rally, you didn't go to a meeting without work to do when you left. And hopefully the spirit would move you to make that commitment in that rally, to go out and do the work that needs to be done. And I think that's really what the nation needs to do. Certainly, the nation that aspires to be what it has purported, has essentially promoted throughout its existence about democracy, the ideals that this nation was based upon, however short of those the experience actually was or has been. But it's, to me, it's time to mobilize. It's time to make those commitments. It's time to get engaged and involved. And in the work of what's happening with whistleblowers, what's amazing about whistleblowers in this day and age, or this day, this time, is that in the past, you worried about losing your job potentially, or being demoted, or getting a bad performance appraisal. Now you're worried about getting disbarred, being criminally prosecuted, being doxxed, being essentially threatened, and I think it's going to happen, killed for speaking out. And yet there's more and more people doing it. The courage is contagious, and these people, I mean, we warn these people when they come to our office, and sometimes it takes us 2 months, 3 months to get all the information together, to get, to complete the investigation, to make sure it's a flawless presentation that can't be disputed. But through that process, we warn these people about, and some actually move out of their own home before they make the revelation or the disclosure. But we warn the people, and yet they are standing up and they are willing to do it. And it's because they see the mission of their agency, of their institution being destroyed. It's something, it's their life, work is being decimated, and they're standing up. And then what has to happen in terms of the American public is they have to get behind these people. They have to listen to these people. They have to get behind these people. They have to do the investigations that have to happen. They have to do the prosecutions that are absolutely necessary.
And that's been the theme throughout this dialogue today. And I thank you all because of the nature of the importance of the investigation, which again was our work with Eric and the con that led me to you guys, because I couldn't understand how it was possible the world I lived in had blown up and created the world we're in, right? And so to the audience, I want everybody to understand, please, this is a reminder, and I know we're getting a lot more consistent viewers and people are more familiar with everybody who's on this panel, but Mr. Clark, Lewis Clark, in the Government Accountability Project, among other cases that have hit the American populace, and we just get overblown with so much information, it's probably hard to remember some of these things. But 6 months ago, roughly, it was Erez Ravini within the Emil Bove case that hit that somebody within the Department of Justice was literally thumbing his nose in a very gross way to judges and decisions about all things, really deployment, I believe, of ICE in Los Angeles at that time and other things that were taking place. But even more to the point, we are so captivated, and I know I have been recently. I just happened to visit an interview that was produced by 60 Minutes Australia of Miss Gouffre. I'm forgetting her first name. Not Virginia. Is it Virginia Gouffre?
Yes, it is.
It is
Yes.
Virginia Gouffre. But I thought I understood her story, but when I saw the interview, it was a lot more compelling and really riveting and heart-wrenching. And it was extraordinary. But when we first started interviewing or discussing Mr. Clark's involvement with the new Untouchables, they had another case that wasn't on the front page of the Washington Post and the New York Times, where they had gotten a stay on, I believe, 327 children that were going to be deported to known sex trafficking rings in Guatemala that were also connected to, I believe, another several thousand. So when we say that the Government Accountability Project is involved with incredibly important stories for this country, this is like Watergate 1,000 times a day, it feels like to me. And the experts on this panel are the people that, with that information to everybody out there, could really do some important work for the American people. So please like and subscribe and share. And I saw Bill, please go.
Yeah, so I just wanted to build on one thing Lewis said that goes together with what we were talking about earlier. There were, in the Epstein matters, thousands of elites. Thousands of elites. This is the dog that hasn't barked. Which of those elites came forward to support an investigation, to call for an investigation, to blow the whistle? Mm-hmm. We're talking about the most prestigious people, not just in America, but in the world, in many spheres, including in our sphere, law, the absolute top, Harvard law profs, top economists at Harvard. None of them that I know of, none of them blew the whistle.
Yep.
Well, like the great George Carlin said, it's a big club and you're not in it. And we can all see it clearly, but we have all been dealing with this for a long time. And we can think back to Roman history. It's just like this weird perversion of power.
No, my point is this is a test. It's not what you say. This is what we call in the biz revealed preferences. Gotcha. I don't care what you say you do. I don't care what you say motivates you. You reveal yourself. And our elites have revealed themselves in the Epstein matter.
Absolutely.
And it is terrifying.
And to put a final point on it, and I'm sorry if if we discussed this already, I was filling out my application to Jones Day after I heard it was $3,000 an hour.
I don't think the lawyers get to keep that, Paul. I think that the firm keeps that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the reality is that the interview of Clinton, in addition to what we've also talked about, he said something that if we would just pull on those strings, we might be able to find more about what Bill was talking about, and the fact, and everyone was talking about, is how he's so compromised with Russia. What Clinton said, and one of the best things, or one of the only things he said that I thought was vitally important, is he said the thing that broke up the relationship of Epstein and Trump was a real estate deal. A real estate deal, and the only other person who said that is Virginia Giuffre, and Epstein has said that. And what's that real estate deal? That real estate deal was the purchase of a piece of property that Epstein was going to make in Palm Beach. He told Trump to look at it, and he said, I wasn't worried about Trump stealing it. This was in 2004. He said, or 2005. He said, because Trump had no money. I knew he had no money. So I wasn't worried about him stealing the property from me. So I had him go look at it. And what he did was he turned out and he bid 450 million. Was it 450 million? I forget. It was it was 450.
He got it for like 180, and then he doubled it up with the Russians.
Right. During the Great Financial Crisis. Yes. And it was ultimately purchased by an oligarch. But what Epstein says is, I knew he had to have gotten that money from Russians because he had no cash to buy the property. And sure as shit, 1 year later, he sold it to a Russian oligarch for double what he paid for it, which everybody says was just a money laundering exercise because it wasn't worth that. And so people need to pick up on those threads and figure out what's going on. Like what about that? Where did he get this connection to Kovalev? How did he get the money to purchase that property? Those are the threads that need to be picked up on and aren't being picked up on.
Yeah. In addition to that, White House also said that I couldn't believe he said this because I heard this earlier, but I didn't think it was true. And Senator Whitehouse mentioned this in his case the other day when he said that Epstein was managing money for Putin. I don't know how much money he was managing for, but that to me would put a lot of things together. Again, to your point, follow the money. Does anybody want to offer anything, closing comments before we check off? Everybody got good? All right, guys. Well, listen, as always, thank you to the new Untouchables again, Paul Pelletier, Marc Dann, Lewis Clark, June Carbone, and William K. Black. My name is Patrick Lovell. Please check out thenewuntouchables.com. Check out thecleannewdeal.org, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. More to come. All the best, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.